Hello, this is Smith Chess Club, the weekly endgame workshop. This video is in preparation of a workshop in June 2020 on the endgame between Mikhail Botvinnik and David Bronstein, the famous 23rd game of the World Championship 1951, an endgame of two bishops versus two knights. In this video, we only look at some theoretical considerations which might help to understand where Bronstein made the crucial mistake which possibly cost him the World Championship title. There can be good and bad bishops. This position shows one with a bad bishop, where the bishop's side lost in only 12 more moves. And there can be good and bad knights. Look, for example, at these excellent knights on d5 and f5 on their outposts. This is, of course, always the first question to ask in an endgame, two bishops versus two knights. However, when those aspects do not immediately show up, it is the overall pawn structure which is critical. Beware that two bishops cover in principle all the squares of the board, but they can never attack the same knight with both pieces together. Whether the bishop's pair is better or the knight's pair depends very much on the pawn structure. Bishops prefer open terrain and pawns on both wings. Knights prefer close positions where they can jump around the pawn structure and more easily dominate one bishop. In order to explain the importance of the openness, I've prepared a few exemplary positions with always the same starting squares for the king, the bishops and knights, and the pawns, or the basic pawn structure. I just added or deducted a few pawns or arranged them differently on the board. Please feel free to stop the video whenever you think you need to understand the position or try to find a solution yourself. With pawns, where is it? Here. With pawns on only one wing, it is dead drawn. There is no way that either side can win. Just moving around pieces on the board. The opposite, with three pawns on each wing, in this structure, it is also dead drawn, because neither side's king can enter the opponent's side, and the light pieces can easily defend against any opponent's light piece attack. Moving around the pieces, but no way to enter. When taking off one or two pawns each side, but still having only two open files in the center, the position is still drawn. The narrow space is just not sufficiently large for the king to enter. The changes when having the pawn chains separated more than by two files. 4 files distance is won by the bishops, because the knights and the king cannot prevent the bishop's king entering opponent's side and going after either side of the pawn. Here's one example. Ultimately, the bishop side is winning. And another example, just one pawn less, still 4 files between the pawn chains. Also here the king side cannot be prevented. The bishop side cannot be prevented to enter the black's position, and they will create a pass pawn. With 3 files distance between the pawn chains, the outcome depends on specific circumstances. This setup is drawn. There is only one access point for the white king which can easily be defended. But adding one pawn on the H file, and we see that in the next example, here, allows tactical means to be used. Sacrifice of a bishop to allow access, to allow the advance of a passed pawn on the h file, and white will win, ultimately. Now, the technical resources are not necessary in the last two examples, which slightly favor white's approach through the open gap on d5. Because here the diagonal h3, c8, this one for the bishop allows to push away the black king which had prevented the entry of the white king via d5. And the last example shows exactly the same. Of course, there's always a lot of maneuvering around these endgames. Now, the number of files between the pawn chains was just an indication of the openness of a position. It is not a principle in itself which defines the outcome of the battle. What the examples, though, have shown us is that the knight's side should always try to prevent the positioning from opening up, and the bishop's side should try to have the opposite, to open the position up and still keeping pawns on both sides of the board. And when we now look again at the first game position of Botvinnik versus Bronstein, 1951, I would say that the critical mistake of Bronstein was to play f5 in this position, instead of playing it closed with, for example, knight c6. Most analysts, including Botvinnik himself, claim that the mistake which lost the championship for Bronstein was committed after the adjournment, 2 moves later, 3 moves later. And some conspirational theorists even believe there was political pressure applied during the adjournment, which led to Bronstein losing the game and the match. I believe the losing mistake was made before, here in this position with f5.